Alright, so let's say you want to start using some open source and local AI models on your computer, perhaps for coding or maybe some agentic tasks. Is it possible? Well, yeah, from experience, you can definitely use some small open source AI models, maybe between 4 to 40 billion parameters on your computer, and they're actually quite capable. Now, just to be clear, they're not going to be as good or as smart as the bigger models from companies like Google, OpenAI, and Anthropic. They have models with hundreds of billions, if not trillions of parameters, and there is no way that a small open source model with 10 or 20 billion parameters are going to beat or outperform models with such scale. So that's not a good thing to look at it, but at least we can use some smaller models to perform some lightweight tasks, like maybe some lightweight coding tasks or agentic tasks, and you can even use some open source models to analyze documents, videos, or creating a new file on your computer to help you do your daily tasks. And those are some things that I have been using in the past several months, using some local AI tools, and I gotta say they are actually quite capable. Now, just to be clear, we are dealing with models with a lot less of intelligence, and they're not as flexible. Usually when you're using some bigger models, you can provide some little prompting, some not so clear instruction, and usually it can fill the gap. But with smaller open source models, we don't have that privilege. But still, with the right strategy, I think we can make the local models to be a lot more capable, a lot smarter and reliable when it comes to performing some tasks like lightweight coding or some agentic tasks locally in our computer. And not to mention, with some smaller models, we can basically offload some other tasks that usually would be done using some bigger models via API key or subscription. And because of that, we can make the model to run basically 24/7, and there is no need for API key or subscription or the 5-hour usage limit. Those things are big and noticeable problem when you're using tools like ChatGPT Codex or Cloud Cover. But with small models, those are not a problem. But then, how do you make the small models to be a lot smarter or a lot more capable? Well, there are a few things that you can do. Number one, when you are selecting or downloading an open source AI model, I highly recommend to choose the one with the largest amount of parameters. So let's say here I'm using LM Studio, which is a tool that I use a lot to download and run local AI models. So when you navigate to model search, you will see plenty of options like from Qwen, Gemma, Nemotron, from Liquid AI, from Mistral, etc. So just look at the number of parameters, and you want to choose the one that is the biggest and also something that can fit quite comfortably on your computer. Let's say here I do have a computer with 16 gigabytes of video memory, and that means I can choose a model with, let's say, 15 or 16 gigabytes in the model weight size. But remember, that is just the model weight. So here, as you can see, I got an example of Gemma 4 with 12 billion parameters, and yeah, it is only 7 gigabytes, which means my 16 gigabytes video memory is quite fine. It is quite comfortable. But that's just the size of the model. It's not even counting the size of the context for the model itself to run the chat window. Like, it's basically just the memory for the model. So let me give you one example. If I'm running, let's say, a Gemma 4 with, where is that? Gemma 4 with 12 billion parameters. So here, at just maybe 7,000, 8,000 tokens for the context length, it is fine. But when I use something that is really, really big, it's going to use a lot more. Now, by the way, this calculation is not accurate, by the way, because it is using this particular model is using quantized aware training. I believe that was the meaning behind these letters, and they're actually not going to use like 44 gigabytes. It's going to use about maybe extra 6 or 7 gigabytes of my video memory. So in total, when I'm running this model on my computer, it's going to use 13 or 14 gigabytes of video memory in the full context length. So yeah, that's just something that you need to be aware of. You don't want to use or download a model solely from the size of the model alone. So you want to consider the fact that it might consume even more memory from your graphic card or from your system RAM, system memory on your computer, just so the model can run and have some enough context window when doing some chat in the AI tool that you are about to use. So that's one thing to know. And perhaps another thing that I would say most people overlook is the fact that they tend to choose the model that is big, but they're not using a new model. Let me give you one example. So let's go back to that artificial analysis page. This is a benchmark for some local and small AI models. So right here in the intelligence level, you can see that there is a model called Qwen 3.5 with 9 billion parameters. Oh, sorry about that. And that model has the score of 32. So 9 billion parameters, the score is 32. It's pretty good, it's quite respectable. And yet we have a much bigger model, which is GPT-OSS with 20 billion parameters, and yet the score is only 24.5. So even though it has more parameters, it doesn't mean it is smarter or better than a new model with 9 billion parameters. So there is a good reason of using a much newer AI model, because usually that means they're going to use a better way to train the model, or maybe better architecture, and that can translate to better intelligence when you are chatting with the model. So first, look at the model size, and then also look at the time or the date when the model was released. Newer is almost always better. Now, let's move on to the second thing, and that is using or choosing a model with reasoning capability. Now, obviously, you have to use a model with tool use, otherwise it's kind of useless these days. So another thing is that you want to use a model with a reasoning capability, and there is also a benchmark that proves it. So let me just go back to that benchmark. Okay, so there is Gemma 4 with 31 billion parameters. The score is 39, but it has intelligence or reasoning enabled. The same model without reasoning capability is a lot lower. It's at 32.3. So this is Gemma 4 with 31 billion parameters, but there is no reasoning. So you can see that by just having the reasoning or thinking enabled, it's making the model to be a lot smarter, because it can plan, it can think through before doing anything, and therefore the output quality is usually going to be a lot better. So pick a model with a reasoning capability. I think that's basically mandatory these days. Now, another thing is that when you are chatting with a model, you want to make sure that it is using you're using the maximum amount of context length that hopefully your computer can handle. So let me just go back to my LM Studio main screen again. So here, let's say if I want to use something like Qwen 3.5, where is that? Okay, Qwen 3.5, 9 billion parameters, and I want to use something that is going to let me use this model for some long chat, or maybe a very complicated, maybe not complicated, but more like a very long coding task or agentic task on my computer. So you want to increase the context length. I think you don't want to set it to be just 32,000 or maybe 64,000. I think you want to use something like close to 100,000 for an agentic task or some coding task on your computer. That should be the minimum in my opinion, because when AI is thinking, it's also going to consume some of the tokens when it is thinking. So yeah, you don't want to use a model that has thinking capability and yet your computer cannot handle the context length for the model. So make sure that you are enabling the maximum amount of context length that your computer can allow. So that's another thing to know. Now, the next thing is that when you are prompting with a local AI model, I highly recommend to make your prompt to be as detailed as possible. So let me give you one example. Okay, I'm going to load my model first. So let's say I want to use Gemma 4 with 12 billion parameters. So yeah, I got this warning, but again, it is not actually true. It is using this unique compression, and it is not something that Studio is aware of, and that's why it thought that, okay, this is using the full precision of the memory, but even though it is not, so that's why it is telling me that it's going to use 44 gigabytes of video memory, even though it's not. Trust me, it is not. So I'm going to just load the model anyway, and just to give you a proof, I'm going to open my task manager, and okay, you can see that right now it is not using all of it. It is just using maybe close to 15 gigabytes of my video memory, but that is totally fine. My computer can handle this model just fine. So I'm going to close this, and let me just go back to OpenCode. So this is OpenCode, quite similar to Cloud Code or ChatGPT Codex, but of course it is open source and you can use basically a local AI model. So let's say here I have a project where I want to create a cycling effort calculator. Now, I don't want to use a prompt that is too narrow or too vague. Create a cycling effort calculator. That is not a good prompt. You want to get something, you want to use something that is a bit more creative or a bit more accurate to represent the idea that you want AI to realize. So create a cycling effort calculator in a single vanilla HTML file. The user can enter distance, body weight, and then elevation gain, and then the user will get the total energy output. And then also I mentioned that I want AI to follow the instructions in the AGENTS.md and then DESIGN.md. I'll talk about these two files later, but for now, just use a prompt that is as detailed as possible, and also not leaving any gap that AI could interpret differently. So that's my advice. Okay, I'm using Gemma 4 with 12 billion parameters. I'm going to send a message and let's wait for the result. Okay, so finally AI just created a calculator based on my input. So let's take a look. I'm going to open that file via a browser, and okay, I'm going to do some testing. Perhaps I want to try the distance to be 30 kilometers, the body weight is 70, and then elevation gain is probably maybe 600, and duration would be perhaps 2 hours. Let's see the answer. Okay, so 400 kilojoules, and then the average power per watt 57.23. I don't know what is the meaning behind this number. Is it per kilometer or what? I don't understand, but basically this is the answer from AI. Now we can always iterate, we can always prompt AI, we can always provide some more examples or details that we want to change. But there are two things here that we need to take a look at this particular project. So in that project, you can see that there is one file, which is the calculator that was created by AI, and then there is also agents.md and then design.md. So agents.md is basically just a markdown file, and this is what's inside that file. Essentially, it is just a file. Sometimes you can even just use a PDF document or maybe a docx document. The format doesn't really matter, but usually people are using the markdown or .md file because that's a format that is lightweight and also AI can access quite easily. And basically that's going to contain some best practices, some instructions that AI needs to follow every time you want to make something using AI. And this is a simple document. I would say usually people have a very detailed and long agents.md file, but for a smaller model, do not make it overly complicated. There is actually a research about having a very long agents.md file will make the AI to be confused. There is actually a research about that. It's very interesting. So basically provide an instruction, a sort of manual book for AI. You can name it like agents.md or instructions.md or skills.md. There is no general consensus about the name, but just provide a file that contains the instruction for AI about what it needs to do, like should it check, should it use a particular coding language, etc. So this is my agents.md file, but this is specifically for coding. For my other thing, I do have very different instruction file. So for me, I prefer to use a custom or create a custom agents.md file for each project, because of course each project will require a specific thing. And this is just one example. You can use ChatGPT, you can use Cloud to create this kind of file. It's very simple. And also right here, you might have noticed that there is the MCP usage, and that's just one way for AI to access other tools. Like it's able to use the web search to get some info from the web, and therefore it might help with the lack of training data. AI can get or gather some more info that doesn't exist in its training data. So that's actually a really cool capability that you could give to AI. So if you have a tool that lets AI to access the web, just enable it and make sure that AI is using it. Now, another file that I use for this project is DESIGN.md. Let me just open that again. Okay, so DESIGN.md, it is in a way quite similar, which is basically just an instruction, but it is for the visual of the app. It's what color, what font, and what library to be used, etc. So this file was actually created by this website, design.md, and then .directory, and I'm going to put the link of this website in the description down below. This is something that you can create yourself, but you can also just copy some designs that people have created, and they look really good. So if you navigate to this website, you can download or get some design.md file based on your preferences. And again, they look really good, and most likely that AI will follow that particular design. So your app, your website is going to look pretty, even though you don't say anything in your prompt about how the website or the app should look. So yeah, that's another way to make AI to be more reliable at producing the output. So to sums up everything, basically first you want to pick a model with the biggest amount of parameters that your computer can handle, and also preferably you want to use a model that is a bit newer, and also usually that means it's going to be better than the other models with the same or even higher amount of parameters. So that's one thing. Secondly, you might want to use a model with reasoning capability, because it will make the model to be able to think through before doing or giving you the answer. And also you want to have a prompt that is more detailed. You don't want to provide a simple, very short prompt. You want to make the prompt to be as detailed as possible. Maybe not overly too detailed, but at least detailed enough that it's not going to leave some gap that AI would reinterpret into something that is completely different. And another thing is that you might want to have a file like agents.md or maybe design.md that will guide AI about what to do or what to choose when doing something or when performing tasks that was requested by the user. So again, you can navigate to design.md.directory if you want to get some references, or you can just create the agents.md file or design.md file manually using other AI tools that, or maybe you can even create that file quite literally manually, like typing the file manually. That is also possible. But either way, just have those files when you are doing something or working on a project using a small and local AI model. So I hope you learned something from this video, and if you want to see perhaps other things that you can do with AI or some best practices about AI, then you can subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you on my future videos. Have a great day.